The boarding party of Oriscan pirates were very pleased with their catch. A Falari transport ship that had just left a spaceport on the way to its mothership. It was loaded down with purchased items, various supplies, and most importantly, the Falari themselves. The Oriscan race had a few similarities to the Falari. Bipedal, 2 ocular organs front-facing on their heads, 2 arms that ended with dexterous fingers. But the Oriscan had a natural armor of keratin-based scales, in various shades of dark purple, claws half an inch long on the ends of their fingers, and a set of fangs that could transport a neurotoxin that would cause seizures and intense pain. They were one of the few predator species to attain sentience. They were, on average, approximate 7 foot tall and weighed in around 200 pounds. Their home planet's gravity was 1.14 times galactic standard. On top of their predatory instincts, this additional strength they possess, due to their planet's gravity, made them very dangerous enemies. The Falari, however, had no natural weapons or protections. They had some scales on their sides, but those scales were almost as soft and sensitive as their pastel blue skin. They had few avian features, even though they were an avian species. Many galactic cycles ago, their race looked very different. Beaks, avian-shaped heads, feet, legs, and a multitude of feathers. Unfortunately for their race, they were discovered before they joined the galactic community, and were used for genetic experimentation. A very long and sad section of their race's history was their dying out as they fought to find a way to overcome the damage done by experimentation. But they did find a way. It just cost them their entire racial identity. The only sign of their original avian forms they now possess is a crown of 7 feathers on their heads when they are adults that sits on top of long soft hair. Though their hatchlings still looked like baby birds when they hatched. They had an almost human-like beauty, were prone to being very slim and mildly androgynous, and were about as aggressive as a strongly worded letter, with very few exceptions. They were approximately 5.5 feet tall on average, and their home planet's gravity was 0.88 times galactic standard. The pirates were excited for this catch, for the Falari sell very well to almost any slaver market. The fact that they had many females and young on this ship just made it that much more profitable. Their leader, Ovnin, only found one thing that displeased him, as his people forced their prisoners off of the captured shuttle and into their landing bay. And that was the weird alien he had never seen before. Only around 6 feet tall, it seemed to be very similar to the Falari. No natural weapons or armor was visible, and while the Oriscan had 4 fingers, this thing seemed to be like the Falari, having 5. Judging by the dark purple color on its lips, and on the lips of the female behind it, they were a bonded pair. Bonding involved both a biological bonding of the two, but also a mental one. It wasn't something that a Falari could choose to do, and was quite rare. It also meant that to sell the female, the male would have to be disposed of, but that could wait. It stood there blocking the female's nudity, but kept its shoulders bowed and head down, its hands covering its privates. The weird alien wasn't acting aggressive. It wasn't armed, didn't look like a threat, but Ovnin had a bad feeling about it. The alien kept telling the Falari around him, "They're just things. They can be replaced," as pirates looted their belongings. They had quite a bit of sealed cargo for a transport, including a large black box that didn't seem to have an opening mechanism. Odd, but probably valuable. Everything was going, as far as Ovnin could tell, optimally. But that alien, it was bothering him. And it's only when one of his people decided to start separating the females from the males that he realized what was so wrong. It wasn't scared. The Oriscans were feared by most every race. Their venom, their claws, and their hardened scales. They were an apex predator, surrounded this named male, and yet it wasn't scared. And by the time Ovnin realized that he was starting to feel scared, it was too late. The investigators that watched the vids later would argue over what triggered the weird male from the race called humans. A female shouting stop as it was groped. A child screaming as it was kicked out of the way as another pirate went for its sibling. Or maybe it was when one of them leered at his female. When one investigator had asked the human which triggered him, his answer was less than satisfactory. None of them, all of them, or just pick one. The investigator didn't push him for an answer further. Evidently being in a room alone with the human was rather discomforting, especially when it won't stop making eye contact. Not that anyone could blame the investigator. For all the hours that had been spent studying the video, it honestly wasn't that long. But it did tell you a great deal about how dangerous the human could be. In the end, one thing is clear. A child screamed in pain, a woman shouted in fear, a fool leered at the bonded and naked female hiding behind her male. And that male stopped pretending. 6 foot tall, approximately 2.5 feet wide at the shoulders, anyone who looked at his unclothed form could see he had very good muscle definition. Maybe if the Ariskans had been familiar with his race, they would have understood the discolorations on his skin weren't some sort of camouflage pattern. They were scars. His first move was the most shocking. He took 2 long strides and kicked the male that had hurt the child in the head. His neck broke instantly. In the act of bringing his foot back to the ground, the human used the momentum combined with a drop to one knee to strike a second Ariskan with his fist right over its heart. It is hard to describe the sound of multiple ribs breaking from blunt force trauma, or the sound of a heart being crushed inside of a chest cavity, but know that it was quite disturbing, even with the poor audio quality the investigators had. In seconds, the human had killed 2 enemies. Normally, this would be when the Ariskans slaughtered the male, but there was nothing normal about this scenario. 4 Ariskans rushed the human as he dived towards a large box and slapped the exterior with his hand, shouting out a word: Artemis! His smile was disturbing as he watched the pirates charge him, but what happened next was worse. The box opened. The human bent over as he reached into the box and brought up his hand, holding a form of kinetic weapon. He fired 4 times and 4 Ariskan fell dead. He stared Ovnin in the eye as he straightened back up. From the box rose a dozen small sensor drones, scattering out from him as he stared Ovnin down, heading out into the ship. He didn't speak. After several long moments, he nodded, raised the weapon again, and fired. Ovnin's body hadn't even hit the ground before the human turned back to its box. The human pulled a pair of shorts out of his box, as well as a shirt. He handed both to his female, standing and watching as she dressed. The shirt covers her to just above her knees. Nodding, he turns to the other Falari and says, "Stay here, do not follow me." He then reaches back into his box. After saying another word, Ares, nano armor flows out and over his body, covering him completely in a skin-tight suit. He takes a moment to strap on some basic body armor over it, puts on a graphical visor, and leaves the hangar muttering, Yeah, I see the overlay. Thank you, Artemis." Over the next 15 minutes, the pirates were eradicated methodically. Room by room, step by measured human step, without mercy. No one but the human, and maybe his mate, really know what set off the slaughter. It is theorized that the human at a primal level is a form of predator. Perhaps he subconsciously felt the Ariskans were trying to steal his prey. It is unknown, and per general order, the human is to be left undisturbed. On the Reclaiming Mothership of the Falari, Ina and her bonded human mate, Richard Markson, sits and stares at his captain, who looks to be getting another one of her headaches. She tends to get a lot of those when Rich decides to fix problems. "Why did you wait to attack them?" Captain Namal glares at the human male, her base crown feathers flapping against her neck, making a gentle popping sound. Rich is used to it. He fights not to smirk, since the sound is generally only made by females when they are getting irritated. It's a sound Rich is very used to, and finds sort of cute. He thinks for a moment before asking his captain a very important question. "Do you want the truth, or something safe for a report?" They lock eyes, and he waits. After several seconds, Nemo stands and goes to pour a couple of cups of tea. She brings them back to the table, sets the copper mugs down, and asks a question of her own. Will not telling me the truth put my people in danger? Rich shakes his head no. Then tell me the truth. I waited, because things could be replaced. People can't, and I hoped they would take the hint and leave us be. Rich shrugs. You and I both know they wouldn't, but if I had just attacked without adequate legal reason, the council would have had my head. This way, I had all the reasons legally required to kill a bunch of pirate slavers without having to worry about getting kicked out of an airlock after a very short trial. Nemo waits, watching Rich as he thinks. He grabs the cup of tea and sips it, hiding a small grimace as he keeps the cup in his hands. That's part of the reason. The main part, the majority of what made me wait, but a small part of me was rather upset at being interrupted, as it were. He blushes a bit as he looks down and smiles at the table. I don't know what kept them alive longer, honestly. The fact that I was the only thing keeping them from leering at my Aina, or that her rubbing my arm while pressed against me was damn distracting, her being naked and all. With a snort, Nemo orders the male out of her sight. She watches him walk out, his gait more that of a feline hunting, rather than a simian. She glances down at his cup of tea and sighs, seeing the grip marks indented into the metal. The poor human was still adjusting to his strength. He can't help but to damage everything he touches if he isn't careful. But that's what happens when your home planet has gravity 1.47 times galactic standard, on top of being a soldier. Maybe she should start putting warnings into ship logs when she sends him off. It might be less paperwork in the end.